I had just settled into an afternoon's quiet when an unexpected storm shattered my solitude. My husband, Ree, whom I'd cherished for 4 years after knowing him for 8, had left me alone for a business retreat, a silent, no-phone escape from the modern din. It was during that enforced silence that the doorbell rang, a frantic, insistent chime that heralded the arrival of my mother-in-law, Ruth. At 56, she'd always hovered on the periphery of our family life, her cool indifference a constant, unspoken rebuke. But that day, she swept into our home like a dark whirlwind, accompanied by 2 small, unfamiliar children, their eyes wide with a silent terror. They never spoke a word, merely observed me as if I were a stranger intruding on their secret world. My heart pounded with disbelief and dread as I stood at the threshold of a mystery that I could neither comprehend nor ignore. What dark tale was about to unravel? I fumbled with a mix of maternal instinct and pure apprehension. My initial impulse, to alert the authorities, was thwarted by a subtle, nagging intuition. Those little faces, the hesitant glances, stirred a memory of connection, as if they belonged somehow to the family I'd married into. Desperation won over, and I reached for the phone to call Ree. His voice, warm yet distant over the line, promised a swift return. For 4 excruciating hours, I watched over the silent, withdrawn children as if guarding precious, fragile secrets. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind outside, amplified the surreal tableau unfolding before me. I dared not leave their side, though every moment felt like an eternity punctuated by the soft, unyielding pulse of anxiety. Could I unravel this enigma before the storm passed? The confrontation. When Ree finally returned, his presence filled the room with an urgency that momentarily stilled the uneasy silence. I recounted the bizarre intrusion, the hushed whispers between the children, their furtive glances, the eerie insistence of Ruth's presence. Ree's eyes darkened with a mix of anger and confusion as he resolved to confront his mother. But before we could seek clarity in conversation, Ruth reappeared, this time flanked by an entourage, his entire family, including his stoic father and older brother with his wife. In a moment that froze time, Ree demanded an explanation. Ruth, with chilling composure, declared that the frightened children were mine, a proclamation so absurd it made my blood run cold. We had always agreed to postpone the idea of children, yet here they were, thrust into our lives by a woman whose loyalty had long been in question. What twisted narrative would she spin next? The air crackled with disbelief as Ruth began weaving a tale that defied logic. She claimed that a mysterious man had contacted her 3 weeks earlier, alleging that I was once entwined with him in a clandestine romance, a romance that supposedly bore 2 hidden children. According to her, I had abandoned these offspring once I married Ree, leaving behind a trail of betrayal and deceit. Her voice, laced with venom, insisted that because I already had children, I now bore the responsibility of raising them, for their father had supposedly renounced them. Ree's incredulous protests were met with her doubling down, her words as relentless as a tempest battering a fragile shore. The room erupted into chaotic shouts and impassioned exchanges. Some family members gasped in horror, while others leaned in, as though hungry for scandal. In the heated melee, Ree set an ultimatum: we would harbor the children for 1 day. If Ruth did not reclaim them by then, he would call Child Protective Services. The mere mention of authorities sent the tiny captives scurrying away, locking themselves in a hidden room, their cries of terror echoing like distant, heart-wrenching thunder. Would justice or further chaos emerge from this maelstrom? After Ruth's abrupt exit in a flurry of unresolved fury, I found myself alone with the trembling children. Their tear-streaked faces, red-rimmed and vulnerable, begged for a gentle kindness that I desperately wanted to provide. I spent the next half hour coaxing them from their shadows, whispering reassurances that no harm would come to them here. With each soft word, I tried to stitch a semblance of safety into the fabric of our shattered evening. Exhaustion claimed Ree and me as we retreated to our room, our sleep punctuated by the silent question of what the morrow might bring. Could we ever mend what had been so brutally torn apart? The following morning brought with it a fragile hope and a necessity for clarity. Over steaming cups of coffee, Ree and I pored over the security footage from the cameras we'd forgotten we had installed. There, in unyielding digital clarity, the truth began to take shape. The video captured Ruth's car pulling up, her figure emerging like a specter as she marched briskly toward our door with the children in tow. A moment of terror unfolded on screen. One child, attempting to flee, was yanked back violently, while the other, emboldened to protest, received a stinging slap that left him recoiling in pain. It was as though Ruth had orchestrated the silence and fear with deliberate cruelty. This evidence, both damning and indisputable, left us reeling. A trusted friend, a police officer, confirmed that our next step was to share this footage publicly, a bold move to reclaim our narrative and perhaps reunite these lost souls with their true family. Would the world finally see the truth beneath Ruth's web of deceit? With trembling hands and resolute hearts, Ree and I uploaded the incriminating clip onto our social networks. The video spread like wildfire, igniting a maelstrom of responses. Among the deluge of sympathetic messages, my brother-in-law was the first to express regret and apologize. Yet, not all voices were of comfort. Ree's own father remained a staunch defender of Ruth, his silence threatening legal action if the footage remained public. I met his threats with a steely gaze and a defiant, silent promise that truth would outlast all intimidation. The echo of my resolve was a rallying cry not only for our innocence but for the hope that these children might one day be safely returned to those who truly cared for them. Could this digital confession be the catalyst for healing? No sooner had the chaos of social media begun to simmer than an unexpected phone call shattered any residual calm. Ree's father's voice, hot with anger and despair, accused us of being the architects of his familial ruin, claiming that our actions had precipitated the collapse of his marriage. Confounded by this barrage of accusations, we turned to Ree's brother for insight. Through tearful explanations and candid confessions, we learned that Ruth's revelations had triggered daily clashes between her and her husband. In the midst of their volatile battles, Ruth had finally declared her desire for a divorce, vanishing into the shadows with a group of her own, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and fractured loyalties. What further secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of this shattered family portrait? In a twist more surreal than any fiction, the true identity of the mysterious children emerged. They were not, as Ruth had claimed, mine by some preposterous twist of fate. Instead, they were Ruth's own grandchildren. The sordid tale unraveled like a forbidden manuscript. Years into her marriage, Ruth had embarked on a clandestine affair. When she became pregnant, a paternity test confirmed that her unborn daughter was fathered by her secret lover. Manipulating her vulnerable husband, she convinced him to relinquish their daughter for adoption, a decision that would haunt them all. Ruth maintained her liaison until her lover's sudden, tragic stroke 2 years ago. Her daughter, scarred by tumult and hardship, and burdened by a failed relationship and a descent into drug addiction, became the reluctant mother of 2 precious children. Their dark, expressive eyes and unruly dark hair were an unmistakable mirror of Ruth's own features. For years, these little ones had lived under the oppressive shadow of Ruth's threats, trained to cower at the mere utterance of CPS. When her daughter's life spiraled into despair, losing her job and succumbing to addiction, Ruth, in a desperate bid to rescue her grandchildren, abandoned them into our care and left her daughter to the uncertain embrace of rehab. The raw confession came later, amid a violent argument where bitter truths and old photos spilled into our lives. I found myself navigating a labyrinth of deceit, realizing that Ree's father was entangled in this tragic saga, living alongside the living embodiment of his wife's long-hidden betrayal. How could such a legacy of secrets be untangled without forever altering our lives? Update 2: Reconciliation amidst the ruins. Barely 2 weeks after the tumultuous intrusion, the family attempted a precarious reconciliation. In an unforeseen turn, Ree's father, following a tense visit to his eldest son, was persuaded by Ruth's plaintive explanations that her infidelity had been a youthful misstep, an aberration that did not define her devotion thereafter. Despite every instinct warning me of impending calamity, he chose to forgive her and pledged to rebuild their marriage. Ree and I, however, remained deeply ambivalent. We decided to distance ourselves from Ruth, whose venomous influence we could no longer tolerate. With my teaching career beckoning me back full-time, Ree's brother graciously assumed custody of the children, promising a haven where they could finally feel secure. In the midst of our grief and uncertainty, the once quiet children began to murmur tentative words of trust, their voices soft but sincere, a fragile sign that, perhaps, healing was possible. Could the seeds of reconciliation ever blossom into true recovery? Update 3: A new dawn for the little ones. A week into their new life with Ree's brother and his wife, the children's transformation was heartening to witness. They had begun attending a nearby public school, and the echo of their laughter slowly supplanted the silence of fear. My sister-in-law, once confined to the unremarkable rhythms of domestic life, embraced this fresh start with quiet joy. Meanwhile, Ree and I had drawn a final line in the sand. All communication with Ruth ceased. Her vicious attempt to tarnish my reputation as a cheater, so blatantly ironic given her own transgressions, was now a chapter closed. Though Ree's father eventually muttered an apology for his earlier misjudgments, I could not ignore the lessons etched in every painful moment. Our family gatherings, once a tapestry of shared joy and sorrow, had become battlegrounds of strained smiles and silent resentments. Yet, amidst this delicate equilibrium, I vowed never to allow the toxicity of Ruth's influence to infiltrate our lives again. Would these new bonds of trust and safety endure the inevitable tests of time? Update 4, Final Reckonings and New Beginnings. Now, a little over 3 months have passed, a span marked by bittersweet progress and irrevocable change. Ruth's other daughter, long entangled in her own struggles, was finally released from rehab 2 weeks ago. In the meantime, my brother-in-law and his wife have steadfastly cared for the children, knowing full well that Ruth's daughter is not yet ready to shoulder the responsibility of parenthood. The irony was palpable. My father-in-law was now living with the daughter of his wife's former infidelity, a twist I found both incomprehensible and intolerable. My own resolve hardened. I would no longer allow a cheater's shadow to darken my door. Despite Ruth's desperate attempts to reach out, Ree's love for me stands as an impregnable barrier. In quiet conversations, Ree confided that the children might soon be legally adopted by his brother, an outcome that would finally offer them the stability they so desperately deserve. As I reflect on the labyrinthine twists of our family saga, I am reminded that some wounds leave scars that time cannot erase, and that trust, once shattered, must be rebuilt with unyielding care. Will the future reward our courage to choose truth over betrayal?